And we are live. It's another great day in Cribl TV. I'm more than excited than usual today. Always a little excited, but today I'm especially excited. Very special guest, Monzy Merza from Krogle, who is here to share what he's been doing lately. We're also going to talk a little bit of thought leadership in terms of what's it like to be a SOC analyst in this day and age, the troubles of being an analyst, the pain you just run into every day. Monzy has some great point of view, and I think what he's doing with Krogle is really something. So I'm just so happy to have him here so we can share his thoughts. And let's get started. So Monzy, how you doing today?
Doing great, Ed. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Hey, so tell me, I really what got you started with Krogle? Tell me a little bit about what you've been doing and what motivated you to get it started.
Well, my journey in cybersecurity started maybe a couple of decades ago, and inside the nuclear weapons complex within the Department of Energy, where I spent most of my time at the national labs as an R&D engineer. And from there, I went to Splunk. I was working as a security operator before in the national labs, then building technologies at the national labs, then going to Splunk and really sharing new techniques with people there, and then became an executive there, and then went to Databricks and was an executive there for cybersecurity for a couple of years. And then, what I started seeing sort of the same kinds of problems over and over again. And I thought, there's an opportunity in the world to do something better for the security operations teams. But before starting a company, what I thought was, it'd be really cool to go back to my roots. So I went back and worked at a global bank for a few months to really feel and appreciate what the security teams go through every single day. And I supported the SOC teams there. That bank had over 300,000 people worldwide, so really massive organization, and really got to learn what's happening all over again. And that's what prompted me to start Krogle. So I joined up with my old friend and co-founder David Dorsey, and we decided to start Krogle. And really, what we wanted to do was wanted to help security analysts do their jobs faster, do their jobs better, and really exercise their own intuitions and exercise their own creativity, and give them a tool that actually did the job and not just something that was Lego block. So that's what we built at Krogle. So Krogle is the world's first fully autonomous SOC analyst, and you can think of it as a junior SOC analyst that sits side by side with you to help you do the things that you would want to task somebody else to do.
That's really cool. I really appreciate your point of view because you've been there. It's not like you're you know suggestion or a thought. You've actually sat there, you've worked cases, you've built detection content, you know what it's like to do this. And so I think that's a great point of view. Because so let's talk a little bit about when you were getting started. What was your normal everyday work process? What frustrated you?
Well, the biggest thing that I experienced was there's just too many dang tools. It's and you don't know where the data is. You don't know whether what the schema is somewhere. So like an alert comes in, it's like it's malware detected on host or something, right? And we've all seen that kind of an alert, and you're like you internally you know what to do about that, because we're all analysts, we're practitioners, we understand this space. And then you start to go through that process, whether you have a playbook, a handwritten process of some kind, or even like an automated playbook. Everything just does the job like part way. And it's sort of it's wetware that's inside your brain that's actually integrating everything. And so it's very tedious. It's like, I know what to do, but is it source underscore IP, or is it SRC IP? Like, what's the name of this field? And where is it? Is it in the data lake? Is it in my sim? So that's the drudgery. And what I learned, like, was super surprising when I went back to work for the bank, was analysts know what to do. And ironically, the tools are actually in the way, because you just have to tie all these things together, and it's chaos. So yeah, so that was a day in the life. And when we finally got across the bridge, it was like, okay, awesome. We got something done. But then there's a pile of tickets over here that I got to go back to and start all over again. So it's a never ending stream. And we it was hard to appreciate sometimes that what we were doing was actually making a difference, and that we were getting better. Like when you're like a sports team, for example, right? Every time you play the game, you get better, because now you're stronger, you learn something, and you're better, and you can do that, and you can apply things. But oftentimes security operations didn't feel that way.
Think about security. Think about you win 8 out of 10 games, you win 8 out of 10 games and you're a football team, you're doing pretty good. But if you win 8 out of 10, 8 out of 10 cases when you're a security analyst, you probably got a breach. And so, I
Yeah.
mean, it's a hard thing to do. And the thing that always struck me was, you work a case, you work a case, and there's so many cases. Half of them are false. The ones you do take so much manual effort. I'll never forget sitting down with one of my SOC analysts, and 21 browser tabs later, he was ready to close the case. And I was just struck like Jesus. I mean, because it's just the context switching, and then and like, where's the automation? How do we make this easier? And so it's striking, and no wonder that there's such an issue with staffing and security, because a lot of these jobs are just tough. They're just not worth it.
Yeah, I mean, I empathize and sympathize, and all of the eyes is right because I did it. I've been there. I get it, and I worked it, and I'm upset. I don't want it to be that way anymore,
Exactly.
and and that's
So
why we built
let's lift
Cribl.
it up. So you were an executive too. So from an executive, what's the value of, let's talk about those business level values of scaling your SOC, helping your engineers close tickets better, automation. Let's talk about that a little bit.
From an executive's perspective, the the security executive is actually in the confidence business. They're not in the security business. They're not in the SOC business. They're not in the tools buying business. They're in the confidence business. They want to give their customers and their employees and internal, their colleagues at their company and any regulatory agencies, they want to give all of those different parties the confidence that they're doing everything the right way or as best as possible to maintain the standards and then ultimately to reduce the risk so that somebody can do business with them and feel comfortable in doing business with them. So that's from an executive's view. The executive is constantly trying to figure that out. And then from an executive's pain point of view, we just don't want to be in the newspaper, to put it simply, because now being in the newspaper has lots of ramifications. Going in the newspaper now can get you in court as an individual and not just as part of your company. So there is a lot of evolution right now in terms of the executive's responsibility for cybersecurity. So the executives are paying attention to try to figure out, well, how do I reduce my risk and how do I bring that confidence and present that to all the different stakeholders, and how do I do that with my teams that I have so that they're enabled and empowered to be as effective as possible to provide me the confidence that everything is fine and I'm not going to show up in the newspaper.
Let's get into risk a little bit. So, at the high level, reducing risk is super important. But what about also your staffing? About preserving your staffing, having continuity. Think about if your SOC is turning over all the time, how hard it is to train. So that if you can have a better working experience, I think you would have less churn, more consistency. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I mean, so that's a second surprise. I shared with you
Right.
the first surprise that I got from the bank, where when I was an executive, I always talked to other executives and they
Right.
complain about a bunch of things. But when I worked at the bank side by side with the analysts, the first surprise, as I shared with you earlier, was, well, analysts actually know what to do.
Oh
It's
yeah.
just like there's all these things in their way. The second surprise was tied directly to what you just said, which
Yeah.
is the teams that were high performing based on the average life of the team, the average experience of the number of people on the team. Not experience like, I spent 15 years doing super awesome things and now I'm on this team for 2 months. No, not that continuity. But I've been on this team for a year and a half or 2 years, and my colleague next to me has been on this team for 2.5 or 3 years. So we have an average life that's longer, that's right around 2 years. So the longer the average life of the team is, the more high performing that team is. So your point about retaining people and your point about having and sticking together as a crew, that is absolutely essential in terms of getting a high performing team. So if somebody naively believes that they can just have a rotating door and they don't have to care about their people, they're missing out on sort of the core of the security operations performance metric, which is how
Yeah.
long do your people are here and how well, because people will perform better when they stick together, and the longer they stick together, the better they will continue to stick together.
And nothing angers me more than people start being dismissing people, because I mean it begins and ends with your team.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely. So let's talk about also, you know, talk about things that annoy me. The AI hype, I think, is so overblown. But one thing I do see, and I think I'm really should hear more about, is sounds like Krogle is using some sort of AI, LLM, some sort of function in order to scale the SOC. Is that true? Can you go into that a little bit?
Sure. Maybe I'll address the hype piece first, and then we'll go to
Yeah,
what
definitely talk about the
we're
hype.
doing. I think everybody wants to hear about the hype piece. I mean, I think there's a couple of important things to recognize. There's a lot of opportunity with the great inflection point that has happened with artificial intelligence, and more broadly with other machine learning capabilities, with in the last few years. And there is a tremendous opportunity for security operations. Now, in order to do that, you can't just slap on an API on top of some LLM that's hosted out on the internetverse, and then expect it to start doing relevant things for cybersecurity operations. Security is a very, in the audience, people know this. Security analysis and security operations is a very nuanced discipline, and we've seen this journey before. We've seen this with user behavioral analytics, where people said, "Oh, machine learning will solve everything," and buy these UBA things, and there was a lot of struggle with that. We've seen the automation promise from the SOARs, and people are frankly sore from the SOARs because they just can't make them work right. And it's so we've seen those things, right? So the hype is there, but I think there is tremendous amount of opportunity. What I believe the way to solve the problem, or to really take advantage of this problem, is to use a compound system, a system that uses things like LLMs, agents, retrieval augmented generation, even some static stuff that is relevant for for an operational perspective. So it really requires a compound system. It's not a simple thing that you just plug it in. And I think it's important for the audience to see that, and for others to see that it's not just about AI. It's just a tool. We've seen tools before. We went from grep to other things, to SIMs, to other to other mature things. We went from looking at network packets to more mature things. We've seen these cycles as security practitioners and these inflection points, and we've used them to our advantage. So the best tool, or the best way to do this, is to, one, have a compound AI system, and then have the sensitivity and really the informed view of a practitioner. So
So
if
I have one
somebody's trying to
question
sell,
though.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
When you're saying compound, what exactly does it mean? That you're using multiple tools or something else?
Uses multiple capabilities, not just so right now, a lot of the conversation, when people have sort of juxtaposed this concept of AI with an LLM,
Right.
and that's only part of the story. A compound system is one that would have an LLM, that have an agent system, that would have a retrieval augmented generation system, that would have this other information that's sensitized from human input. So it's a combination of things. It's not just one single element
I got it.
that causes the value. And ultimately, it has to be sensitized with what people are doing. It has to learn. Any useful system in the artificial intelligence arena, including especially for cybersecurity operations, has to be sensitized by human input.
I think that's a good way to put it. I mean, one of the things when we were talking before that really struck me was your focus on helping your teams work better. I constantly see the idea, and especially I see it in the developers, like, use your AI to replace developers, which I think is kind of dumb, first off. But I think I like your point of view in terms of we want to help our SOC analysts we have, give them support. We're not looking to replace anybody. Does that sound about right? Is that kind of what you're thinking?
You're not going to replace a SOC analyst, not anytime soon. At least with the available technology, there has to be some insane miracle that would happen. I like to use the simple example of a mass credential compromise. We had this conversation just yesterday. Just imagine the following scenario, where um, the you observe a whole bunch of alarms for known good credentials that are being used at a very high volume for multiple people, perhaps hundreds of people in your organization, in a very, very narrow window of time. Now, a hard-coded machine rule, or even an intelligent one, would look at that and say, somebody must have compromised your credential store and has your credentials, and now is trying to log in simultaneously into a singular application all at once across multiple users. Now flip the switch, real-time story. This is a scenario that I've observed multiple times as a practitioner, because it was a snow day. And people who used to come into work are now logging into the VPN concentrator. I'm kind of showing my age when I use the word concentrator, but people are logging into the VPN concentrator like, okay, I get it. That's what's happening. There's nothing to be alarmed here. So A human would know that. Yeah, and people can argue, well, a machine could know that it's weather and this and that. It's like, no, there's too many nuances. And so I think machines have to, and then that's sort of the third surprise from, and the last one, I promise surprises in my outline for this talk, is the third surprise was, in order to build a system that is useful to security analysts, it has to learn the way security analysts learn, and has to do what security analysts do. So it can't just be theoretical. It can't just be like, oh, we'll leave it up to everybody else and, you guys figure out the rest of it. No, you have to have the humility to say that we're going to learn, we're going to continue to learn, and we're going to actually do, and we're going to take correction, and then we're going to learn again. And that's how a system ought to be built. And that's what we try to build. I mean, I can show you, I can give you a couple of examples. I'm getting all pumped up with some of this.
Absolutely. So yeah, let's do that. And also, I was wondering, so anyone who's listening, if you've got any questions for Monzy, please share them. We'll answer them live. Let's go ahead and share your desktop. Let's show Krogle off.
Okay, awesome. Well, let me show you. I'm going to show you two kinds of examples very quickly. I'm going to show you the newsy example, and I'm going to share with you the noisy example. And so, let me see if you can see my screen here. Are you able to see this this advisory?
There you go.
Okay.
Yep, it's on the screen now.
Okay, awesome. So now imagine now imagine that it's Monday morning or whatever the date on that on that screen is, and then you see this super amazing, very useful CISA advisory. This is very useful. It says, there's an Androx Ghost compromised. It's very important. Everybody needs to go look at it. And you say, okay, great. So it's very useful. It has a lot of information. It has lots going on. There's TTPs in here. There's URLs. There's IPs. There's just a lot of stuff. Very useful, but not very usable. All of you who work this kind of a problem, you've all contended with this. I'm highlighting the HXXP. What the heck is that? Well, that's a redaction. It's supposed to be substituted with HTTP, and you're supposed to get rid of this, this little bracket. So there's like small companies that are just focused on just this one problem. And so you say, what, this is too hard. Your CISO's, breathing down your throat. Your SOC manager, SOC directors coming down and say, hey guys, what do we know about this? Is this reportable? What's the importance of this? So you say, you know what? I'm going to go talk to the world heavyweight champion of AI, and I'm just going to ask, do I have Androx Ghost on my network? So everybody knows this user interface, and so you type it in, and then the world heavyweight champion tells you some things about it, including the thing that you always knew: engage cybersecurity professionals. All right. So now we flip this over to Krogle. So I'm going to go to the Krogle chat user interface, and I'm just going to type, do I have Androx Ghost on my network? And Krogle says, okay, Androx Ghost says this thing. It's a report from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I'm going to use two platforms to try to figure this out for you. And by the way, I want to create a ticket too, because we should document our work, because this could become reportable. It should be auditable. And I'm going to use Splunk. And here are all the Splunk queries.
That's awesome.
Relevant to your environment. These are not just like made up Splunk query from somewhere out on the internet. These are Splunk queries that are generated that are relevant to your environment in order to deal with Androx Ghost. And of course, we're at a Cribl talk. Krogle has a Cribl integration as well. So these are the Cribl search queries for that, to be able to do that. So now you have something actionable.
Stop you. So, and just for anyone who hasn't set a SOC, not everyone knows how to use search tools the same. And so by being able to give example searches like this, it helps get that head start to find that data right away. I mean, I love that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, this is what we've all ever wanted, right? We know what to do. We know we have to search this and we have to search that, but how do you
so you're running the searches too? Nice,
right? And again, in the spirit of transparency, this is not a black box. So Krogle is telling you that, hey, these are the searches I'm running. And so within the system, we have built it so that if you disagree with Krogle and you say, hey, Krogle, you're just you're an intern, you have a lot to learn, good effort, but you have some things to learn. But let me show you, kid. And you can go into the system, you can modify the individual search, you can disable a search, you can create a new one, and the next time something like this happens, it will do it the way you taught it to do it. and it'll get better, and it'll get better the next time. Now let me show you the flip side of this. So you're like, yeah, CISA advisories, I don't get CISA advisories every day. I have all these tickets. I have these tickets for, like, malware detected on host. I have all these phishing complaints and all this other stuff, right? I get tons of those. And so you say, okay, well, here's an example for what I call the noisy situation. Let's say that you get a ticket, and you get lots of these kinds of tickets, right? Where it says malware detected on host. And it has some information. Looking at the top line here, malware detected on host on Eddie's laptop, and there's some information here. Okay, cool. Now what do I do? Well, what Krogle does immediately, as soon as it sees the alert, Krogle can monitor your ticket queue. It sees the alert, and it says, oh, this is a ticket of type malware detected on host. Now, the important thing here is we are not shipping Krogle pre-built with malware detected on host categories. It's learning from what you have and what you deal with. And based on that, it's saying this is a malware detected on host category type of thing that you've seen in the past. And since it's learned from what you have done in the past, and it knows best practices, it understands concepts like the kill chain. It knows how to read a document that somebody may have written for a process. So it understands those things. It says, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run queries against Splunk, Cribl, and Panorama to triage and start the investigation process. And it tells you what it's actually going to do. And then
So do you have a
it does an
tie-in with
impact
the SOAR
analysis.
platform?
I'm sorry?
Do you have a tie-in with the SOAR platform to automate the response too?
Sure, we can tie in with any number of platforms. Of course, that list of integration keeps growing. So it gives you the verdict. Now, of course, analysts don't look, you already have plenty of single glasses of pain. I know people like to call it single glass of pain, but I like to think of it, all these glasses of PAIN pain. And so we don't want to give you another one. So with Krogle, what you have is, I'm going to show you another ticket. Let me just switch over. Same ticket that I showed you earlier. And when the ticket comes in, it just looks like what you see here on the top line. Whereas malware detected on the laptop, here's some description. Immediately when Krogle sees the ticket, Krogle generates a response plan, and it tells you what it's going to do. Very transparent. And it says, these are the steps I'm going to take. If I'm going to run some queries, I'm going to touch some platforms, just like an analyst, like it's using the technology. It's not just an integration. It's actively using the technologies. And it says, if you want to inspect my work, if you want to learn some more, here are other tickets like this one. And then it starts to execute the queries, and it tells you what those queries are. The other thing that we do is we don't duplicate data. Krogle is not a data duplicator. So as it goes through its analysis, all the way through, it only brings back summaries of results so it can go to the next step in its response plan. So it can chain things. Like, what do we do as analysts, right? We search for one thing, we take the results from that one thing, we put it in the other thing, and then we do it again and again, and no other system can sort of dynamically do that. Well, Krogle does that. The other thing that it does is it reflects back to where the data is. So here, for example, if you want to see these results from the Cribl search, so that you know how Krogle came up to that final verdict that I'm about to show you. You can see the query that Krogle ran, and you can see the Cribl search results in Cribl, so that you can start to build confidence in Krogle's work, just like you would test an intern's work or an analyst that's maturing through the process. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty decent at writing a Cribl search, but not everybody is. And honestly, I don't think everybody should be. Cribl search is awesome, but you don't need a PhD in writing searches for Cribl search and figuring out what these, like look at this. There is a field label here called hot dogs. And I know that's kind of an extreme example, but those of us who have searched for things in the past know that field labels and schemas are never normalized. Things have all kinds of names. Krogle understands that, and it can figure it out, and it can work through the processes. So I'll just fast forward. So there's all these queries that it runs, and then at the end of it, it says this threat is real. I found vulnerability. I found these two assets or three assets that are impacted. I found this identity that's impacted, and here's a vulnerability that's impacted. And so now people can continue on, like a whole bunch of work. Even if you're awesome, and many of people on the call probably are, how long does it take you to run multiple queries against Splunk and Cribl search and Panorama and CrowdStrike and Athena and all these different things to really come to a conclusion that something needs your attention.
Right, and
And
I love
so
that skill set
that's
because
what we're doing.
you're lifting people up, and I just you're lifting the whole team up with and without having to be an expert, and like you mentioned, just too many tools. It's very hard to be good at everything. So I mean, I think this is really valuable. Hey, we got a couple of questions from the audience, so I'm going to display them.
Sure, go for it.
All right. So is this search feature using a search tool? What he's asking what event it's using, events going through or from a SIM indexer. So I think let's go back to that you're using Splunk and you're using Cribl search. You want to get into are using an API? How are you running that search?
Yeah, the search. So first, the first question is part of the question is really what search to run. And so Cribl has learned the internal processes once it's deployed in your environment based on your tickets, and then also gone into your tools, just like an analyst, right? When you're a new analyst, what do you do when you get to the job? You get some credentials. You're like, hey, here's the login for Cribl search. Here's a login for this other thing. So when Krogle gets installed, and here's a login to the ticketing system. So Krogle gets access to these different systems. And then as soon as it's deployed, it goes in and logs into the system, just like a curious analyst, and says, hey, I wonder what data is in here. And so it tries to learn all of that stuff. So it learns those things. Now in comes a new ticket. When a new ticket comes in, it says, oh, I've learned this from Bob, and this is what that thing from Alice. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my login credential, because in this situation, I need to go and log in to Cribl search. So we're using APIs to log into Cribl search, or we're using APIs to log into Splunk, or we're using APIs to log into any number of tools, and then connecting up and going through that response plan in a sequence, just like an analyst does, going to one tool at a time and escalating and gathering up all the necessary information from each piece and going to the next step, using that information for the next step, and so on. So short answer is through APIs, but it's not just like a blind pre-programmed thing. It's really imitating what it has learned to do from other analysts, just like we as analysts imitate our most favorite analysts. And that's what Krogle is doing.
How you have a response plan, so that way even the most junior analyst knows exactly what to do. They know all the steps, they know the search. And I think over time that helps speed up gaining experience.
Yeah, and it's just really the transparency too, right? Like you have I pulled this up because it's relevant to that kind of a question. Is this is this is a response plan UI page, and really we are showing you exactly the things we're going to touch, or exactly the things that Krogle has touched in the course of the process. So when you have a phishing email, what do? You try to figure out all the things about that delivery phase in the kill chain. Then you take that and you say, well, what happens next? Was there persistence? Was there exploitation? Did something get written to disk? And then you go try to solve that piece of the problem. And then you go see, well, is there exfiltration from this, or is there other lateral movement as a consequence of that? And so Krogle works in that similar fashion. It is trying to solve the problem and not just look at the ticket and go, oh, this is a phishing email. Well, let me see. Well, looks like Bob's email is working just fine. So no big deal. I'm going to close the ticket. Well, that's not the kind of analyst you want. Most of us are not that analyst. Most of us are kind of analysts who assume breach. And we want to know, like, how the heck did this email get here in the first place? Who sent it? Why is this? Is this related to a particular attack? Is this related to a previous ticket? Can I go see, has this email been passed on to other people? I just haven't seen the ticket yet. Is this ticket related to other tickets? And so it's doing all of that, but it's doing all of that at a very, very high pace. But it's doing all of that because it's learned from people. And now people don't have to, somebody now, a human, can go and inspect the work and say, well, this is good, this is not good, but the organizational stuff, it needs to be done this way, or this is the next step, escalate, de-escalate, do all the important things that a tool can do.
Cool. We have another question from the class. So I have a question. Some SIM stores are giving generative AI and other types of AI integrations. What do you think about, are they useful for us, or is it too early for us to shift? And I think you're starting to answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. First, I like to divide the world sort of in terms of tools in two categories. There are tools who give you ideas and inspiration, and there are tools who actually do the job for you. And so my response to this question basically is that if the kinds of tools that you're looking at are actually going to do the job, take that tool. And the one that's just going to give you inspiration, if you're a researcher and you have a lot of time on your hands to like really tinker with things and try to understand, certain things, then you can go do this other thing. But most of us don't have time for that. I think the security, there's like a very important thing that's happening, I think, from a threat perspective right now, that necessitates the adoption of a doer, and not just an adoption, not just ideas. You want to buy tools that are doers. And Krogle is a doer because it's an analyst. It's a doer. And the thing that's causing that, one of the biggest things that's causing that to happen, and you can look at some of this data starting back like late 2022, right around the corner when ChatGPT was publicly introduced. The Nigerian emails are pristine now. They don't have spelling errors. They don't have grammar errors. They're awesome. They're beautiful. They look very reasonable. They're so awesome that they go to Stack Overflow and they go to GitHub and figure out what source code you made a comment on. And they're crafted so awesomely, beautifully, that you will fall for it. And so what's happening now is the question in the world is no more that, oh, you have this many alerts and you have to have this funnel and you have to reduce the number of alerts. No, the funnel is like this now. The number of alerts that require human attention has grown significantly than what it was before.
Yeah,
and as analysts, we know we couldn't handle it before. And now we got this thing happening. We need somebody else to start doing some work for us.
Right. I think that's incredibly important. It's the only way to survive, for your team's sake, but also for your company's sake.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. Hey, so I want to ask you a couple questions. So we're getting toward time. So just for anyone who doesn't aware, so Cribl has what they call a startup program. And so your idea is that you help give startups access to Cribl tools to help give you help give you some lift, help getting, and also just from a self-serving aspect to get Cribl tools more exposed to different companies. And so I'm just really, really proud to have your company as a member of the startup program. I really enjoy that. We really appreciate it.
I'm very grateful to be a part of it. And this is great leadership on the part of Ledion, Clint, and Dritan, the three founders of Cribl, to think this way. They've lived the journey and they're supporting those of us who actually want to solve real problems for people and are passionate about our work to support us. And I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. And I think this is one to be able to showcase what you're doing, the work you're doing. And I want you to come back soon. We want to keep having this discussions. Maybe we'll talk through some more use cases, because I think this is an underappreciated aspect of security programs that's just critical. Because I don't care if you have the best EDR, if you have the best SIM, if you don't have the people to work those tools, to bring that data together, to make sense out of it, it just becomes a lot of expensive money and burned out teams.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ed. Thank you for having me. If there are any other questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah,
Otherwise, I really appreciate the attendance.
So for the class, do you have any questions? We're here. We're going to bring Monzy back because we really enjoy this. But if you ask questions, and also if you come back into the channel and ask some questions later, we'll get Monzy's attention and get those answered too. But I really, really appreciate it. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. So we're going to
appreciate everybody being here. Thank you, Ed. Thank you for hosting me.
Absolutely. Take care. And so check out Krogle. Krogle. Check out Krogle. Take a look at it for your SOC. I think it's just going to make a real difference. So we'll be back soon. Thank you for everyone's time, and we'll talk soon.
Goodbye.